This video is probably going to be all over the place, but it is what it is. I think today I want to talk about entrepreneurship in general. I would say, first of all, in my personal history, have I ever was I ever like socialistic or communistic? And yes, I was. Back in middle school, I was socialistic, and even if I wasn't very political, my attitude was one of envy. As a matter of fact, that was probably my dominant personality characteristic for as long as I can remember, for a very long time. And, you know, what caused the envy? Well, you know, you get envy of, first of all, there's the sexual biological drive. So then you get envious of people in shape, and you don't want to get in shape, so you just whine about that, and then you go over to somebody's house and it's really nice, and and then you get envious of that. And envy is a very strange emotion that I don't fully understand. I know there's people that have done, I've read the book by Helmut Shook or whatever, but envy's theological because the Bible says, "Thou shalt not covet." So, in my own personal experience, I used to be a very envious person, and my envy was rooted in physical traits, but also the dream career. Oh, that guy's a comedian. I wish I was a comedian. That guy's an athlete. I wish I was an athlete. Whatever. Anything that had the word millionaire beside it, and anything in the entertainment business, I was envious of. Okay. So if you want to say that envy is like a natural human emotion, I agree with you. It's also a sin. Thou shalt not covet. So the whole everything about the whole notion and aspect of envy, covetousness, is sin, theologically based. Okay, great. So how do you get out of it? Well, God has to get you out of it. So I guess He did get me out of it, because I don't really experience it like I used to. Because it used to be my dominant personality trait was envy. And as far as the political side of life goes, I was just generally socialistic, but I wasn't hardcore in any way. I really didn't care about politics at all until Ron Paul started talking about liberty. I'm like, well, who doesn't like liberty? That sounds good. And then I started educating myself. But I was very envious, but I was lightly socialistic, and I wasn't really communistic at all. So thankfully, I never gravitated toward Marx or any of those people. Why? I don't really know. I don't know why I never gravitated toward Marx. But I gravitated toward Ron Paul naturally, which is interesting. Why does anybody hate Ron Paul? First of all, if you hate Ron Paul, you're an evil person. You're a sinner. You're going to hell. Okay, if you hate Ron Paul, you just are. There's no reason to hate him. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe like General MacArthur said, all problems in the world are basically theological and spiritual. There's just too much spiritual wickedness in the world, and that's why people hate Ron Paul. That's why they like Marx, I guess, even though he was part of the master race too. But I can't explain why I didn't gravitate toward Marx and why I gravitated towards Ron Paul instead. That's a great mystery to me, because so many people don't. Like, okay, there's a lot of people that did gravitate toward Ron Paul, and there's other people who gravitated toward Marx, and there's other people who never entertained Marx who gravitated toward Paul. There's people who were Marxists who gravitated to. I can't explain all the differences, and I can't explain why I was never a Marxist. I can't explain that. Why was I never a Marxist? It's like a deep philosophical mystery of life. Why did we evolve with 5 fingers or whatever? Okay, it was because of God. But why was I never a Marxist? I guess because of God. But I really was never communistic. And so if I look at it might be a privilege, okay, that I never gravitated towards it. Why didn't I? Why do so many other people do it? Why do so many other people? I mean, I was raised lower middle class. Most of the people who are Marxist are upper class, upper middle class, at least upper middle class, way more money than I've ever had. And it's almost like their consciences are so full of guilt because they're not willing to give the homeless person, money or a place to live or a job, that they want the government to do it, or they want taxpayers to pay for it. Taxpayers like me, lower middle class, okay. But I just find social phenomena so strange. Why was I never a hardcore socialist? I can't explain that. I'm not apologizing for it, but I don't understand why did I gravitate toward Ron Paul, where other people didn't. They gravitated toward Marx. Why this difference in your natural interests? Is it a personality thing? Maybe. But is good and evil a personality thing? I don't know. It seems kind of weird. But I can't explain why I was never really hardcore socialist. I can't explain that. I can't explain why I gravitated toward Ron Paul unless God just directed me that way. But then why would God direct people to socialism? Maybe it's like Romans 13. The Lord makes war. The Lord controls governments, and the Lord decides when people go to war. I guess, I don't know. But it's just interesting to me that I never really gravitated toward hardcore socialism. Lightly socialist, not even moderately. I was lightly socialist. If someone said, something moderately socialist, I was okay. Like, there should be welfare. Yeah, okay. That sort of thing. But it never really went militant or any more hardcore than that. And really, the only thing that changed for me was when I got of age where I needed a job. And I'm like, okay, so why do we need money? Because I really hate talking about this, but I used to think money was evil because I was, I guess, raised a Free Will Baptist, backwoods, whatever. I naturally thought money was like evil in itself. So when I would get money for my birthday, I would put it in a wallet and leave it on my dresser drawer. I thought it was evil. So I had like a neurotic fear of money. And so when my dad told me to get a job, I'm like, that's sinful. That's what got me interested in economics. So I gravitated toward Ron Paul naturally. Why do other people gravitate toward Marx? I don't know. But I didn't. I gravitated toward Ron Paul. And then, of course, finally found Rothbard. And so I don't understand why other people don't have the same life experiences as me. I don't understand that. It's like if a raindrop falls from the sky, if it falls to the west of the Eastern Continental Divide, it ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. If it falls to the east of the Eastern Continental Divide, it falls into the Atlantic Ocean. So how does the wind determine the fate of the raindrop? Well, ultimately it's God, but why would God make me libertarian leaning? And why would he make other people Marxist leaning? Just to create war and bloodshed? Maybe. I guess. It's kind of weird. But anyway. So I was never really socialistic, and I've been libertarian for a while. And so I don't really want to, I'm not going to try to like reach socialists. To me, it's like being a Christian and going into a Muslim country and trying to convert people. You're just going to get your head cut off. It's not really worth it to me. See you in the afterlife. We'll all get judged. I'll see you there. That sort of thing. But I guess I'm going to try to focus my attention on libertarian people or business people or entrepreneurial people or people who are sympathetic to that notion. I'm not interested in the other people. I'm not interested in communists at all. just gonna block. I'm gonna block you. I don't want your envy and your covetousness to sap me. So I guess this video is going to ultimately be about how I feel about entrepreneurship just in general. First of all, I would say that sorry, I'll try to pause it from now on. First of all, I would say that I think it's good to, Rothbard really heralded the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur are the ones who really change the world. They change life. They're the ones who create the things that we take for granted. Nobody appreciates them. Nobody understands what they do. And covetousness takes over their lens through which they see entrepreneurship. So you can dismiss their opinion based on the fact that they're covetous, ultimately. But nobody, even if you're not that communistic or covetous, very few people understand entrepreneurship. And it really should be heralded, because I personally am not of the opinion that Amishness is like the ultimate virtue. I don't necessarily see progress itself as bad. I'm speaking to it through a phone. Okay. I just don't see that as bad. I don't see how, I'm just going to say climate change is a myth. You're getting suckered by climate change. It's a myth. Climate change is a myth. Hello. Climate change is a myth. I don't care what you have to say about it. It's a myth. It's a myth. Trees breathe carbon dioxide. You can always plant more trees. Like, stop it. It's stupid. It's stupid. All you have to do is start an arbory. Plant trees. Oh, it takes 50, it's just a bunch of stupid fear mongering. That's all it is. If you, and these people, they can ignore the millions of people killed by governments with no problem. They're more concerned about little fluffy animals and trees and inanimate gasoline and oil. They're more concerned about that than they are the fact that communism, socialism, statism literally sheds the blood of millions of people. They love that. They relish that. Why in the world would anybody support them? Unless it's just a Romans 13 situation and God's using, God used Lenin to judge sinners. God used Hitler to judge sinners. God used Stalin to judge sinners. Okay, fine. So maybe the communists are the sword of the Lord executing his judgment. Fine. But I, in my conscience, cannot support that. And the question is, why? Why am I different than them? I can't explain that. I can't explain why I'm different than them. I don't, unless God made me different, I don't know. Unless God made us different. I don't know, but I can't do that. I can't, I just can't do that. Yeah, I used to be covetous, but I wouldn't say I'm covetous anymore, especially not like I used to be. I mean, it still can happen. I'm not saying I'm perfectly immune from it, but I'm not so covetous to the extent that I want to overthrow the American system. I don't understand these people, other than the fact that they are giant coveters, and that's a sin. They're just giant sinners. Communists are giant sinners because they're breaking the commandment of thou shalt not covet. Communists are coveters. Communists are sinners. I don't know what more I need to say. They're sinners. They're coveting. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ox. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ass. Thou shalt not covet. They're just giant breakers, the most giant breakers of thou shalt not covet in the world. So why in the world are we heralding sin like that? Do I sin? Sure. Do I tell people to sin? Yeah, I do. But that's not one that I'm going to do. It's not a sin that I'm going to endorse and support. I'm not going to endorse covetousness. And I've been covetous, and it's a weird place to be. It sucks. How do you get out of covetousness? Well, ultimately, I think God has to get you out of it. But for me, I'm thankful I was curious about money. You know, when my dad said you need to get a job, I've always been the one to ask why. I think that's really helped me out. Why are the roads in the middle of the line yellow? Why are the lines on the outside of the road white? You know, I was always a why person. And I think that saved me from being a communist. Because I asked the question, why do we need to have money? Why do we need to have jobs? And when Ron Paul came around, I mean, thankfully my dad was pretty patient with me. He didn't kick me out or anything like that, thankfully. But, so what I did was, you know, I was staying at home. And I'm like, I need to figure out why he's wanting me to have a job. Because I don't get it. I don't understand money. I don't understand jobs. I don't understand anything. And thankfully for me, I took the intellectual route. Ron Paul came around and I started watching a lot of Liberty videos. I watched a lot of Milton Friedman. I watched a whole bunch, and it started sinking in. But then when I found Rothbard, when I started reading him, that's when everything fell into place. So I can't recommend him enough. You know, do I agree with him politically? I can't because of Romans 13. It'd be great if I could be an anarchist, but I can't because of Romans 13. But don't dismiss his economic analysis just because he's an anarchist. You're really doing yourself a disservice there. You know, if you don't want to read Power and Market, don't. Okay? If you don't want to read his anarchist stuff, that's fine. But at least read his economic stuff. You know. And I would honestly just try to I would recommend reading like everything he ever wrote. Just try to read it. And once again, why was I never a communist? I can't explain it. Why does one raindrop go to the Gulf of Mexico and another raindrop to the Atlantic Ocean? Because God, you know, I guess God never wanted me to be a socialist. That's why I was never a socialist. I guess maybe God wants you to be a socialist. That's why you are. I don't know. But I really can't recommend Rothbard enough. I seriously cannot recommend him enough because the clarity of his thinking is just amazing. And he really gives you a different way of looking at the world because there's really no point in covetousness. Like he to me is like a really good explainer of why covetousness doesn't work. It's like, okay, people don't value your work. Well, that sucks. I've been there. I've been there a ton. Okay? But you just have to keep trying something different. And if you don't like that, then you're essentially trying to fight against human nature. You know, and you could say, well, murder is human nature, pedophilia is human nature. Why you fight against them? Well, I think you have to. It's impossible to not be theological about this. Where do we get our standard of ethics from? You know, people like Stefan Molyneux and even Rothbard did this, and I don't agree with. This is one area I don't agree with Rothbard. Because Rothbard argued an objectivist ethics deducted by human reason. I don't agree with that. You know, to him, human reason was the ultimate standard of truth. But human reason cannot explain Jesus turning water into wine. So the supernatural side of life, you know, human reason can't do it all. Because Jesus turned water into wine. I guess I'm using my human reason here, so I'm a hypocrite. But because Jesus turned water into wine, I cannot support Rothbard's view of objective ethics. Ethics being objectively derived from human reason. You know, the Thomist position. I can't agree with that because Jesus turned water into wine, and that defies human reason. You know, the Bible talks about the natural man, and the things of the Spirit are foolishness to the natural man. So I cannot use objective ethics derived by human reason as my ultimate standard of truth. Okay, I used to love the philosophers and reading, you know, Aristotle and whatever, all of them, you know, whoever it was that talked about human reason. I think it was Socrates. I used to love that stuff. But then Christ comes into my life and saves me against my will. And I just, even before that, I always had this sense that God has to come into play somewhere. And so I can't use human reason as the ultimate source of truth. So that's one area I disagree with Rothbard about. That's the objective ethics derived by human reason. Now you could say, well, then what's your support for libertarianism? Well, my logic is this. Number one, Romans chapter number 13 kind of says that whatever government does is justified. I don't like that. I argue with the Bible all the time. But that's what it says. Governments exist to wield the sword against sinners. That's Romans chapter 13. I don't like that. That means that the communist regimes were bearing the sword against, or the gun against sinners. North Korea is bearing the sword against sinners. You know, it's I can't argue against that. So how can I be a libertarian? Why am I not like a status quoian? Okay, status quoian because of Romans 13. I guess in a sense I should be. But the question is, why am I a libertarian and not a Romans 13ian? You know, why do I support the Confederacy's right to secede, even though God's sovereignty didn't allow for that to happen? I don't know. That's one. It's like asking, why was I never a communist? I don't know. Why am I libertarian? I don't know. Does libertarianism violate Romans 13? I kind of think it does. It's kind of interesting. Another area I disagree with Rothbard about, kind of sadly, but I do, is Rothbard was very critical of the Puritans, the religious people, the Christian fanatics. Rothbard was Jewish, so he's fine. He'll be in heaven. Romans 11. But he was very the Catholics were more, when it comes to theology, there's two great trains of thought. There's the Calvinists, and then there's the Free Willers. And I've made fun of the Free Willers tons on this channel. I might unprivate them, but I like to make fun of free will because I used to be a free willer. And when it comes to free will, you never know if you're saved or not, etc. Blah blah blah. But then, to me, Calvinism was like a breath of fresh air, theologically speaking. But I'm not trying to talk religion and theology too much right now. The point I'm trying to make is that Rothbard was, because he viewed human reason and objective ethics derived from human reason as like the ultimate truth. He supported the Catholics of, you know, the Scholastics. The Scholastics were Spanish Catholics, and they were very libertarian, not completely, but more so than the Protestant Puritans. You know, the Protestant Puritans are always the abolitionists, the prohibitionists when it comes to drugs and prohibition of pornography, whatever. Prohibition. Giant statists, which I kind of I only agree with because of Romans 13. I can't argue against Romans 13. I don't like Romans 13. I'd rather be a Rothbardian. I'd rather be an objective ethicist. I'd rather be like the Spanish scholastics that were Catholic and believed in free will. But I can't believe in free will anymore. And I'm proud of my free will videos, but I can't. I have to support and believe the Calvinistic position, the predestination position, and all the rest of it, election. I have to support that position. And the problem is that I face a chasm, a disconnect when I apply that to economics. So I want to be a full Rothbardian economically, and I want to be, a human reason ethicist, objectivist ethicist, and I'll try to be as much as I can, a libertarian as much as I can. But what's my basis? If I'm an anti-free willer, if I'm a God sovereignty person, what do I do when God's sovereignty declared the Union victors over the Confederacy, and I want to support the Confederacy? If God's sovereignty supports communism and socialism, then who am I to fight against it? Because he uses them to wield the sword against sinners, according to Romans 13. So I'm very frequently finding myself at odds with God and the Bible. I'm not even talking Jew and Gentile today. There's no difference. There's no difference. Sure, buddy. Yeah, there's no difference. The Bible says it, but it does not seem that way evidentially. Anyway, the point that I'm making, the whole reason for doing this video, is I don't understand why I never was a communist, why I never was a Marxist. I don't understand why I don't understand why I never was a communist or a Marxist. I don't understand why I turned into a libertarian. I'm not complaining. I just don't understand God's sovereign will over that. So I guess I'll say I'm not here to convert communists. I just don't want anything to do with covetous. I know what it's like to envy, and I don't want anything to do with the covetous. That's first and foremost. So I'm not here to convert communists. I'm not. I don't care. I'm just going to block. I don't want anything to do with people who take sin, the sin of envy, the sin of covetousness, and make that their political philosophy. I don't want anything to do with you. I'm not going to. I'm not going to. But I will say that I don't know how Rothbard did this. He had such clear thinking, Entrepreneurship doesn't have to be the focal point of life, but it needs to be a focal point of other people's lives, or it's a good thing when it is. Let's put it that way. I do want to be entrepreneurial, if I can be. It's hard, it's hard to do things that people care about. It just is. But I wish that myself and I wish that others would be more appreciative of people who are richer than them or have more money than them. I wish that I would appreciate business people more, corporations more. I'm not saying they're perfect, but the main reason that people criticize corporations is because of their own covetousness. That's the majority of the time. They're skeptical of corporations because the corporations have money. And money is not evil, but covetousness is. So the whole reason, the majority of the time, the reason that people are critical of corporations is because they are covetous of the amount of money that corporations have. They're jealous. They're haters. That's the majority of the time. Oh, what about valid criticisms? What about when they dump pollution in the water? What about when the video games? I'm not saying they don't do that stuff. I'm not saying that you shouldn't criticize those things, but I'm saying that the lens through which you view the corporation is colored by covetousness. And so your whole view of corporations and wealth and money is a sinful view because you are viewing it through the sin of covetousness. And that's the majority of people, when they talk about corporations, when they talk about the wealthy, their ideology is covetousness based. Therefore, it can be dismissed as sinful. And so the alternative to covetousness and sin is to you don't have to be an entrepreneur. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that it should be heralded. It should be celebrated. Entrepreneurship should be celebrated. I think everybody should try to be an entrepreneur, and I think everybody should, for the most part, not quit. I think you should never quit trying to be an entrepreneur. Seriously. If you can just accept, being a wagey, okay, if you can accept that, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're at peace with it, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have peace with your job and you're okay. If you're dissatisfied, though, the solution is entrepreneurship, period. The solution isn't to shed the blood of millions of people. The solution is not sin, the sin of covetousness. The solution is to, number one, I would say read Rothbard for your, if you have qualms about entrepreneurship, if you have qualms about wealth, qualms about this, read Rothbard until your qualms go away. And then, after that, what you want to do is realize that communists are covetous sinners, and then you won't support them. And then what you want to do is just think about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is ethical. The ethical justification for this was written by Rothbard, among others, but really him. And so once you get rid of the qualms of it, because it takes a while, it really does. You really have to study to realize how free trade benefits both buyer and seller. Unless you're really smart and you just figured that on your own. It took me a long time to realize that when I buy something and someone sells something, we both benefit. Otherwise, I would just, if I wasn't going to benefit, I would just keep my money. If I didn't, the mutual benefit of exchange was the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around, because it just seems instinctive and natural that it's not true. But the reason that it seems that way is because of covetousness. You're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I'm getting rid of my money. I want money, So I would say read Rothbard until you understand at least that free trade benefits everybody who trades freely. It's self-evident. It's self-evident. If I buy something, I'm expecting that I'll be better off with what I'm buying than the money. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep the money. If I look at something and I say I'm going to be worse off if I buy that, I'm not going to buy that. It's self-evident. So read Rothbard and Mises, but really Rothbard, until you understand that free trade is mutually beneficial. Just keep pounding that. Just keep pounding his words into your head until you realize that free trade benefits both parties. Free trade benefits the buyer. Free trade benefits the seller. And this is self-evident, because if it didn't, you wouldn't do it. It's self-evident. Oh, but listen, man, I don't want to give. Why do I have to give corporations money just to have electricity? Why do I have to give corporations money just to have food? Because you have no historical understanding. Zero. You have zero appreciation for history. You have zero appreciation for the back-breaking work that farming is, bare subsistence farming that everyone did pre-industrial revolution. You have no appreciation for pre-industrial revolution. You certainly don't have any appreciation for the industrial revolution, because you are a covetor, a sinful covetor. That's why you don't have any appreciation for the pre-industrial revolution. So, in conclusion, read Rothbard until you understand that free trade benefits both parties. And then, like I'm going to try to do, it's not easy, but I'm going to continue to try to be entrepreneurial. I really think that's the essence of life. Yeah, I know Jesus is king. I get it. Blah, blah, blah. But the essence of life is entrepreneurship. Failure and success, both, as part of it. But I'm just making this video to encourage you to be entrepreneurial. And whatever it is, YouTube video, whatever it is. It can be anything. It can be any business. Doesn't matter. I'm trying to encourage you as a fellow human being to be entrepreneurial. And if you're like I used to be, where you think that money is evil and entrepreneurs are evil and business is evil and corporations are evil, I would encourage you to read Rothbard and Mises if you want, but Rothbard, read it until you come to understand, come to believe, let's put it that way. I'll say understand too, that free trade isn't inherently evil. Like, you can get deep and theological about it, fine, whatever. Okay. But I would still say try to read it until you realize that free trade benefits both parties. Until, or, you know, I'm not going to buy something if I think I'm going to be worse off with it. Likewise, I'm not going to sell something if I think I'm going to be better off if I don't sell it. It's self-evident. It's a self-evident axiom, the human action axiom. Read his work until you come to understand and accept that free trade benefits both parties. Everybody hates that. They hate it. They hate it. So if you're one of those people who hates it, I'm going to keep telling you, read Rothbard until you stop hating it. Read Rothbard until you understand, well, wait a minute. If I buy a Mountain Dew, I'm signaling to the universe that I think I'm better off with the Mountain Dew than not. Oh, but it's unhealthy. But, it's a bunch of straw man, stupid crap arguments. It's annoying. You have to think about it from an economic lens. From the economic lens, if I look at that, if I look at if I'm like dying of thirst and all they sell is buttermilk, I'm going to look at that and say, I don't think I'm going to be better off if I drink buttermilk. I think I'm going to be worse off. I'd rather be thirsty than drink buttermilk to satisfy my thirst. Therefore, I'm going to signal to the store that I'm not going to purchase that buttermilk. You see my point? It's a self-evident axiom. But once it's elucidated, it just makes crystal clear sense, and then you can't see anything through any other lens. So I would encourage if you're covetous, you need to get right with Jesus. If you are right with Jesus, then I would encourage you to read Rothbard until you understand that free trade benefits both parties. This is a self-evident axiom. And then once you accept that, I would encourage you to try to be an entrepreneur in whatever area you think, whatever area. I would encourage you to try to be entrepreneurial. It's a never-ending battle. You're going to fail a lot more than you succeed. But I think that entrepreneurship is the essence of life. And I hope that you can discover that. And hopefully, best of luck to you, and best of luck to me too. I really hope that there's more entrepreneurs in the world and less covetous people. I want more entrepreneurs, more people trying to satisfy people, more satisfied customers, satisfied consumers. And, maybe one day I'll address some of the other complaints that people have, but until you read Rothbard's economics, set aside his politics. Don't read his politics if you don't want to. It's radical. You'll probably hate it. That's fine. But read his economic stuff. If you read his economic stuff and attempt entrepreneurship, then get back to me and we'll see how much better your life will be, because I promise you it will be. Thank God for Rothbard. He's helped me out a ton. He's given me a great lens to view the world. And I'm just going to keep telling you to read him until you do. And I'm going to keep telling you to live as an entrepreneur the best you can. If you can't, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with being a wagey. Unless you want something different, then you need to try entrepreneurship. So that's why I'm trying to tell you to try to be an entrepreneur. If you hate being a wagey, then try to be an entrepreneur, because that's the only alternative. Covetousness and bloodshed is not the alternative. Attempt entrepreneurship and repent of your covetousness. And best of luck out there.